Well, hey there. Welcome to the Roundup Podcast. My name's Isaiah Babcock, and I'm the Digital Content Manager for SBTC Collegiate. As the summer closes out and we head into the fall, we wanted to bring you a mini season of the Roundup Podcast that features all of the breakout sessions from the Roundup Conference this year. All of the episodes are dropping at the same time, so be sure and check them out as you look to reach the campus in your context this fall. Enjoy.
So since we're a smaller group, before I jump into the content, let me hear from you guys. Who are you? Where are you from? What church are you from? What are you doing? That kind of thing. And what do you hope to get out of this breakout? Like what brought you here? You're up front, so.
Hello. My name is Brian. I am part of Walnut Creek Church in Des Moines, Iowa. And I am going to be working for their campus ministry starting in a week. So I just finished my last assignment at the senior at Drake University yesterday.
Congrats.
Thank you. I'm here because a big thing that we've been thinking about and talking about within our ministry and within our church is how can we more effectively raise up students to go overseas. Students maybe like me, and then also just other students, and making sure they know that that's an option for them.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian.
James Crockett. I'm a college minister at Hillcrest Baptist Church over in Cedar Hill, which is just south of Dallas. Been there about 7 years now. And main reason I'm in here is we've been, really the past couple of years, been building out a disciple-making culture within our ministry, kind of formalizing that. And I think the next step for our ministry is developing more sending strategies. So kind of what's the end goal of making disciple makers, and how do we effectively send out students when they finish college and stuff. So yeah,
That's awesome. Great. Thanks, Jason.
I'm Alex. I'm a college ministry strategist for the state of North Carolina, and I would love to help our churches develop more systematized pathways for sending. So I'm excited to hear about discipling the whole student, and part of that being sending pathways.
Awesome.
I'm Dee. I'm a student leader at Houston First Baptist Church, and I'm here as we start ramping up like our mission focus for just college students. I guess I'm just trying to learn what is a good pathway of doing that as we begin sending students to different countries.
Awesome. Great.
sorry, Mike.
You're on the hot seat now. So, who are you? Where are you from? What are you doing? And then what brought you to this breakout?
My name is Caleb Thompson. I'm from Des Moines, like this guy, Des Moines, Iowa, if you guys don't know where that is. And I direct our campus ministry at Drake University. Actually, all our campus ministries in Des Moines. We have 3 campuses there. And we're trying to kind of figure out in our we have a lot of people in our ministry who want to go overseas for the long haul, for the 10, 20, 30 year.
That's great.
And so we're trying to figure out just our pipeline to getting people overseas.
Okay.
And how to incorporate that within the collegiate ministry, summer trips, short-term trips, etc. So.
Great. Well, it sounds like you all are in the right breakout. So hopefully this will answer some of your questions. Before I jump in, though, I wanted to get this printed out, but it's a big fat packet, so couldn't get it all printed in time. If you scan this, it's a PDF of our team's whole pipeline book. So you're going to see in there every element of our pipeline, and you can also print it out after this and begin to develop your own pipeline. It's kind of a workbook, not just a playbook of what we're doing, but will lead you along to kind of develop your own pipeline, and we'll have a little bit of time to do that as well. We got a worksheet there for you. But a little bit about myself. My name is Madison. I'm the director of sending at Redeemer Church in Lubbock. So been there for almost 2 years now, which is crazy, coming up on 2 years. Before that was in Kentucky. Shortly before that was in China. Used to have to say East Asia, but since we can't go back for the foreseeable future, everyone with the organization I was with was banned. So China, screaming from the rooftops, missions in China. So I was there for 4 years and am originally from Los Angeles, so slightly different than Lubbock, but we love it out there. So a little bit about Redeemer Church. We were planted in 2008, and since then we've sent 67 long-term missionaries. Currently we have 34 actively serving overseas among the unreached, and 8 more, Lord willing, will go out in the next 6 months or so. So by end of this year, early 23, we'll have 42 active long-term missionaries, which I think is pretty incredible. And I love to brag about it because I had absolutely nothing to do with it and just stepped in midstream, right? And we're about 1,200 adults on Sundays on average. So per capita, that is a huge amount of sending. So praise the Lord for what he's seen fit to do in the middle of nowhere in West Texas, right? Just decided to use this church plant to raise up lots of long-term goers. And we're also really unapologetic in our focus. We are intentionally focused on sending people to do intentionally multiplying church planting among the unreached. So pretty narrow in our focus in what we're sending people to do. Because there's a lot of good things that we could do, right? Like orphanages, we could do missions in Central or South America. But I'm convinced, and I'll make the case for this really briefly later, that focusing on multiplying church planting specifically among the unreached is the best and most strategic thing you can do with your time and resources. And it's actually the kind of thing that gets college students really excited because it's a huge, huge task. But we're also doing a lot of domestic church planting as well. So that's another big part of our sending efforts, is sending with domestic church plants. So since 2008, through Redeemer Lubbock, and then also the plants that we've planted directly, we've seen 25 churches planted in America, then also 1 in the UAE, and then 2 more are to be planted domestically in the near future. So 2 of our church planting residents are here, actually. You might have heard from one of them, Justin Smith. I don't know if he had a panel or something at some point. One thing that someone said, I got up at 3:45 this morning, so I'm a little bit, not firing on all cylinders. But someone said, kind of like the why, right? Like discipling students towards what? What would you guys say is your why? Why are you reaching students? What's the end goal? If you have maybe it's a mission statement for your college ministry or something.
Our mission is we're connecting students to disciple-making relationships that honor Christ and advance God's kingdom. So the ultimate win for every college student is that they're equipped to be a disciple maker and they can go out and do disciple making. So that's our basic mission.
Great. Yeah.
I guess we kind of do 3 principles. Robert, I can't really think of what the coherent sentence is, but we're growing with college students, so that's kind of in the church, gathering with them also in the church so that we can equip them to go and reach the people on their campuses and the people around the world.
Cool. So go, gather, or grow, gather, go, something like that? Okay, yeah, cool.
Yeah, for our campus ministry, it's for Christ. And I think that we can all agree that people need to know and understand the gospel. The gospel is salvation to everyone who believes. And for Christ, for his church, it's the way that God designed to reach the world. For students' church, disciple making. For campus, we want to focus on the campus, college campuses. That's an extremely strategic way to influence the world. And then for culture, we want to influence the world. So we're focusing on campus to be able to reach the world with the gospel.
Okay. Very cool. Does the state convention have like a mission statement for reaching college students, the why?
So our mission is to empower local churches to make, multiply, and send disciples. We would say that we want students to experience freedom and then glorify Christ. But that mission statement is really focused on empowering the local church.
Cool. Very cool. Yeah. So, we always want to start with why, right? If you are not absolutely convinced about why you should care about sending, you're probably not going to send much. Students can tell what you really care about, and they're probably going to start caring about what you care about. And if it's not sending, you're probably not going to send a lot. So just really briefly, I want to start with why sending. I don't want to assume that we're all on the same page there. And really, from Genesis to Revelation, God makes it abundantly clear in His Word that His desire is for all peoples to know Him. So beginning from Genesis 1:28 with Adam and Eve, God tells them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, right? His design was for His image bearers, His worshipers, to fill the earth with His glory. And we see this again with Abraham in Genesis 12, where He says, in you, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. And then we see in the prophets, like Habakkuk 2:14, points us to when this will be fulfilled in the future. There will be a day when the earth is filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. So we know that this will happen, and how it will happen is through individuals coming to know and worship Jesus from every tribe, tongue, and nation. Like the shirt, right? Revelation 7:9 says, after this I looked, and behold, a great multitude that no one could number, from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes, with palm branches in their hands, and crying out with a loud voice, salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. So that's the end, but how is it actually unfolding in history? We see it through the Great Commission, right? It's given by Jesus to the church, and it's Jesus saying, go therefore and make disciples of all nations. This is how this plan is going to unfold, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you, and behold, I'm with you always to the end of the age. But I think we can get confused, especially if we're, head down, nose to the grindstone, thinking the Great Commission is for our campus, or it's for our state, or it's for America, North America, whatever. But of course, it's for all nations, right? Go and make disciples of all nations. So if you set your eyes on what I would argue is a man-sized goal, right? Like our campus, then you shouldn't be surprised when you don't see these really God-sized things happening. Because really, we should lift our eyes up. Like, yes, do reach your campus, of course. Don't hear me wrong. But lift your eyes up and see that the fields are white for harvest, not just at your campus, not just in Texas, but to the ends of the earth, among every tribe, people, and language. And this is God's design for His people, right? Psalm 67, verse 1-2, the psalmist prays that God would be gracious to us, His people, and bless them and make His face to shine upon them, that God's way, your way, may be known on earth, your saving power among all nations. Like, this is our design as God's people, is to be blessed by Him, to be a blessing to all nations. It's not supposed to end with us in our church or on our campus. And really, this kind of compelling vision of a purpose from Genesis to Revelation, a purpose for students' lives, for our lives that we're inviting them into. This is the kind of thing that's compelling to college students. I was just looking at a survey that found that 71% of Gen Zers would take a pay cut to do meaningful work. Like Gen Z folks, Gen Zers, I guess, they desperately want to do something meaningful. And you are inviting them into the most meaningful thing that they can do with their lives, which is make disciples, not just here, but among all peoples. So always start with why, right? Why are we doing this, and what are we working towards? So in a second, I'm going to dive into the nuts and bolts of sending, what we're doing, and hopefully how you guys can implement some of that stuff. But if you can really briefly tell me currently what your mission sending efforts look like. Just in a nutshell, what would you say it looks like currently at your guys' churches?
We're a hybrid campus and church-based ministry. As far as the church in general, we have a ministry within the church called 1040, and our goal is by 2020 to send out 8 long-term missionaries, and COVID made that difficult. But I think there's like 8 that have been sent out, and like another 8 to 12 that are getting ready to go. They've either gone to, are you familiar with Radius?
Mm-hmm.
Radius International. They've gone to Radius and are preparing to leave, or are getting ready to go to Radius to prepare to leave.
Awesome.
And some of our college students right now, most of those people have been at one point in time raised up within the college ministry. Like probably like 75% of those people are from within, but there hasn't been a link from the campus ministry to the 1040 ministry. It's like you get out and get into life and then get back into 1040. So there's like an element of, hey, we want to reach the world that they developed within the college ministry, but there's not like a connection between the two quite yet. So this summer we're sending one girl over to Egypt for one of the SBCs. I can't remember what organization within the SBC.
IMB.
What is it?
IMB.
The IMB. She's going to be in Egypt, I believe, for the summer. So
Very cool.
that's a really long way of saying one mission trip with one of our students within our college ministry.
Very cool. What about you guys?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm honest, I don't know if our church really has a great developed sending strategy. I mean, we do a lot with missions. We've adopted the Pelong people over in Thailand and Laos and that area, and so we've sent some people out in the past from there. They're still there doing work with the Pelong people. As far as college ministry, it looks like we do mission trips. One of the things we're starting to do, and I'll be taking a team of college students and adults to Wyoming this summer for a week trip to help a church plant up there. We're looking at potentially doing more with helping some of these church plants in Wyoming. But yeah, I mean, we have a few things, but yeah, kind of reason I'm in here is more developed strategy of like, one of the things we do, I will say one of the things we do like for the summers, we direct college students towards, we have a ministry that our campus hosts called Skylark that it's basically like a day camp for kids, but it's really targeted toward kids and communities. We want a lot of unbelievers, and so that's one of the things over the summers we've directed students towards. We've had a lot of students be involved in helping run that and be around a lot of lost kids, and so that's one thing we've done. But yeah, wanting to build that out more of like from the time someone becomes a freshman, comes to our ministry for the first time, that we have certain areas we're directing them to. Like if we build out this Wyoming thing, do we have like, hey, here's a pathway if you want to be involved in a church plant there, or with our Pelong peoples, or wherever it is. So yeah, we're kind of still trying to develop some of that.
Cool. Great.
So our church as a whole has a really great missions office. It's just the connection, like feeding into the college ministry that isn't as strong yet.
Similar issue, yeah.
Yeah. So we do with the college ministry. We have a lot of more like short-term mission trips, like Cambodia over the summer. Over spring break, we had a team go to Nepal. And so the Nepal trip was completely new, so we're still like growing in that aspect. But as more students are expressing interest in like wanting to be long-term missionaries. We have a girl that came back from Nepal and like is working with the IMB now to go on a 2-year mission with them. Since students are expressing interest, it's important for us, and I'm here to develop that pipeline with the missions office a little bit more.
Yeah. Awesome. I'd like to talk to you after about the Nepal thing. I'd be interested to hear who you did it with, if you know their name. But so there's really two common models of sending. One is the most common, and that's the kind of passive or hand-raising model, right? And that's like, we're going to maybe preach, once or twice a year. If you're a college ministry, you'll have the traveling team come through, something like that. Maybe you'll have a mission trip or a missions emphasis week, right? But the goal is that God will speak to students through these kind of speaking engagements, these larger rooms. Some people will feel that call, they'll raise their hand, and then you can tell them, go to imb.org or Frontiers or Pioneers or whoever, and I'll fill out a reference form for you. And that's about as far as it goes, right? And that's certainly better than nothing. Like, do not hear me wrong. If you ever preach one mission sermon in your church, I'm like, great. Awesome. That is much more than many churches are doing. So don't hear me putting it down. But there's a less common model, which is what I'm going to show you, is what our church does. And I would call it like the hand extending model. So if there's the hand raising, the hand extending model, the kind of come with me, more active model. So churches that do this, and we're far from the only one, are likely sending a disproportionate number of people overseas compared to the passive model, where if you're in a church that God is really moving, maybe you're going to send a person or a family a year. That would be pretty extraordinary in your average church. But this kind of hand extending model, you're going to see you can send quite a bit more. So it involves not just, preaching a sermon and then telling people, consider doing something that's totally different than you've ever done before. Sell all your stuff and go overseas. It's a big jump, right? Instead of doing that, we're saying, come with us and we'll take you on little baby steps, many, many, many small steps that will eventually lead to you going overseas. So it's much smaller asks. So we're going from mere exposure then to like light participation to a larger commitment, something like a 10-week disciple-making team that I'll tell you a little bit more about here in a second. And then continuing to grow, receive training, and eventually step into like a 9-month missionary training program if they're really feeling like, I want to discern this calling to serve among the unreached, and then eventually going. But there's not these huge leaps between each one. It's come with me as we take one baby step here. So college students at Redeemer are constantly being challenged, not once a year during the missions sermon. It's constantly, they're being challenged on how they should leverage their lives for the kingdom. And each year, every student leader, so every student who's in our leadership pipeline gets an interview, a kind of like closing interview to the year, an exit interview. And during that interview, they're asked, what are you going to do with your life post-graduation? They're presented 3 options. One is be an all-in church member, either at Redeemer or elsewhere. The second is go with a church plant, or the third is go overseas. So they want to move towards doing these kinds of interviews with every single student who's plugged into the ministry, but everyone is being challenged directly, like, consider leveraging your life among the unreached. And that's happening every single year that they're in college. And then just this past year, the college ministry, they recorded a video where every student who's graduating, they called it like commissioning night for the seniors. They recorded a quick testimony saying, I'm being sent as an all-in church member to Austin, Texas, or I'm being sent as an all-in church member here or wherever else. So it's constantly constantly keeping this vision in front of the college students and challenging them to consider leveraging their life among the nations. So if you're not regularly challenging college students with this, not just once a year or, during a missions week, like, don't be surprised when not a lot of students are considering it, right? Because it's really out of the norm and countercultural. I want to lay out for you our pipeline in a second, but first I want to tell you that and it sounds like you're all on the same page with this when you're here, but there is a big benefit to having a pipeline. Okay, you might not be the biggest fan of like systems and processes and all that kind of stuff, and I get that. You want it to be organic and that kind of stuff, but here's the thing: the purpose of a pipeline is having clear next steps for people. So like having a short-term trip is great, but if at the end of the short-term trip you don't have a clear next thing for that person to do, then it's really you just had a fun event for a week. And it's the same with a mission sermon or really anything that you do that's engaging people with God's heart for the nations. There should be a clear next step. And that's the benefit to a pipeline, is having a system where you know what people are being invited to at each step. And they might even know up front. So it's not being sprung on them out of nowhere. Hey, consider this big leap. So why should you shift to more of this hand extending model versus the hand raising model? Many of you, all of you, are not missions pastors, right? You're thinking, I don't have the time for this. I got so many other things to worry about. But here's my pitch. Is it shifting from focusing on just the campus to your campus and then to the nations will actually pay huge dividends for you reaching the campus. Because as you develop disciple makers to send to the nations, you'll find yourself with a huge number of students who are actually equipped to make disciples where you are. Right? And I think this is a desperate need. So sending people to the nations, like I said before, is a desperate need, specifically to the unreached. So these stats might be super familiar to you. So apologies if this, is just hammering home something you're already super familiar with. But I don't want to assume anything. So does anyone know how many about unreached people groups there are in the world? I just want to see if I'm preaching to the choir here. Rough. 400? Add 7,000 to that, and then you would be right on the money. So 7,400 unreached people groups in the world. So that makes up about 3.29 billion people. So that's the equivalent of the population of Texas 114 times over. So imagine 114 Texases where, unless someone goes, there is very little to no chance of these people hearing the name of Jesus, right? And popular statistics state that only 3% of missionaries who are sent out go to the unreached. So there's a huge imbalance here. Yes?
How do you define unreached?
So unreached, that number of 3.29 billion would be people groups. And a people group is an ethno-linguistic grouping of people where the barriers are significant enough to where the gospel can spread freely within it, but not jump that barrier into another people group. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So unreached means those people groups have 2% or less evangelical Christian. So the 2% is kind of arbitrary, but that's the number that through sociology and observation, they found that if it's below 2%, the rest of that people group is probably never going to hear the gospel because it's not a large enough grouping. They're not strong enough churches to actually multiply to reach the rest of that people group. So there's some places that we think of as probably unreached that really aren't. Like where I served actually on the East Coast in China is not technically unreached because that people group is more than 2% evangelical Christian.
So those are two variables. Unreached would be this people group, language group of people is less than 2% Christian, and it's not going to jump to another people group?
So the unreached is really just 2% or less evangelical among them. So there's another category, to not muddy the waters, but I think it's important, and that's frontier people groups. So frontier people groups are unreached people groups where there is 0.1% or less evangelical Christians among them. So this is like the most unreached of the unreached. Frontier people groups, 0.1% or less, and no indigenous gospel movement among them that would be sufficient to reach the rest of the people. So that one actually has two factors. So these are, so there's another category, a third category, unreached, unengaged. Frontier people groups are actually different than unreached, unengaged. Frontier people groups, what's crazy, why I introduced that is because, so this is extremely unreached, right? 0.1% or less Christian, and no real movement of like churches planting churches or anything like that among them. Frontier people groups actually make up almost 25% of the world population. 1.9 billion people lives among frontier people groups. There's one in Bangladesh that's well over 100 million, and many in India that are 70, 50 million, numbers like that. I mean, these huge numbers, huge people groups with almost no believers among them. So my challenge would be, is it worth focusing your time and efforts on sending people to these like most unreached places? I would argue yes. Right? And this kind of challenge is the thing that really gets college students going. It gets them excited and says, yeah, that would be worth giving my life up for, is seeing Jesus worshiped among peoples where his name has never even been named before. These peoples who are beyond lost, they actually have no realistic possibility of even hearing the gospel. So if you want to know more about that, a good website is Joshua Project. JoshuaProject.net has all the people group information. They actually have a prayer guide for the 31 largest frontier people groups specifically. But there is a huge need there. I mean, you just look at India. The Joshua Project estimates that it's over 40,000 missionaries would be needed to reach all the unreached people groups just in one country, India. So back to the shift. How will this impact your college ministry? Because it will impact the nations, right? If we're sending more well-prepared laborers to labor among the unreached, that will impact the nations. But how will it impact your college ministry? Well, I'm going to run through a couple of the things that we do, and I think you'll be able to see how these actually pay dividends for your college ministry as well. So, for instance, if you looked at that pipeline book, you'll see all this laid out in greater detail. But one of the big things that we do, and this would be under the first block in that pipeline worksheet that I showed you. The first block is like learn, so exposure opportunities. What we do, and I'll talk more about this in just a moment, we do Mission of God, which is similar to Perspectives. If you've heard of that, it's a 10-week missions course. It's got a lot of practical application opportunities and so on, but we've seen students go from like just attending on a Sunday or on a college gathering Tuesday night, really not plugged in through this 10-week group where they're forming community, they're in breakout groups, they're eating dinner together, all this kind of stuff. They really get plugged in, and it pays huge dividends for the college ministry as they're being exposed to the nations. They're really getting plugged in with community as well. We also do regular evangelism trainings. So these are more like come with me opportunities, teach people how to share the gospel, then come with me as I go on campus or to a grocery store and start up conversations with lost people. And then people can take that and run with it on the college campus and the college ministry as well. We have disciple making teams, which we'll come back to that in just a moment. Short-term trips as well pay huge dividends for the college ministry because you get relational depth and excitement about sharing the gospel that you can just never get in a kind of normal environment. Look at you got your pipeline development worksheet there. if you can, on the back, really briefly, I'll give you like 1 minute. Draw out your pipeline as it would exist right now. So the most basic pipeline ever would be someone raises their hand, we point them to the IMB or whoever, right? That might be your pipeline as it is right now. What would your pipeline look like? Maybe it might be a mission sermon, and then that leads to a short-term trip, and then that leads to a raised hand, and then that leads to connect them to a missions agency or whatever. What would that look like for you right now if you had to sketch it out? All right, let's see what you have so far. And like I said, whatever you have rough, let's see it, because I want to see kind of what elements you have currently, because what I'm going to do is run through the kind of 4 big elements of our pipeline, and then you can begin to develop those 4 elements for yourself as well on the other side of that worksheet. But let's see what you currently have. What are the big elements?
Kind of the ground game domestically, sermons, discipleship conversations, evangelistic mission trips. We just sent a church plant to Rhode Island, which is less than 2% evangelical. So technically would fit the unreached people group criteria. And then we take our college students to the University of Florida every single year and do evangelism. It's kind of the baseline. We have a missions pastor as well. So kind of the second tier would be you have a desire to go
connect him to the missions pastor.
Missions pastor, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
We also have a course called the Journey course, which is kind of like Perspectives, but it's a little bit shorter, mostly because college students don't have a lot of time before they're done with the semester. And that's a 6-week course focused on missions. So we bring in people from Radius or Engage up in Minnesota or various other places. And then it's just 6 weeks talking about missions with different topics each week, just kind of so they can get their foot in the door as to what's the problem and then what can they do about it and what does it look like.
That's awesome.
Is that every 2 years or 1 year? Every year?
I don't know. I've taken it once, but I had the opportunity to take it twice at least.
Very cool. What about you guys?
It's very rough. I mean, not much of one, I would be honest.
That's fine.
Short-term trip. Usually to like a missionary that's, our church supports or our church is partnered with. This will, again, we're taking a small team to Wyoming. That'll be our first time doing that. This is just something we have to develop out a little more.
Yeah, cool. But I mean, in your defense, let me defend you. You're already doing a lot more than most churches do, honestly. So don't count yourself out. Yeah.
So with it, we have missionaries come talk, like that kind of small exposure within our small group. We call them bro groups, but it's like a Bible study.
Mm-hmm.
This is something new, though. We're going to start implementing discipleship and disciple-making principles from the IMB that were taught to the Nepal team, so that everyone in the college ministry is equipped to go anywhere, whenever. And so moving on into short-term mission trips through the college ministry. Our college students can also go with trips that are just provided by like the missions board as a whole at Houston Spurs. So Sorry. Or once they graduate, if that's still something they're interested in, they can continue with Houston's First Mission Board, and then from there, or straight out of the college ministry, we would probably send them to the IMB, is what our church usually partners with.
Cool. Okay, very cool. Yeah, so I think, really when you're thinking about developing a pipeline, you really want to kind of have 4 elements, and you'll see that on that worksheet, right? There's learn, which is like exposure, right? Just mission sermons, classes, hearing missionaries talk, all of those things, that would all file under learn, exposure, right? And then you're going to want to get the practical part, right? So you're going to want to, this is the come along with me kinds of elements, right? So that would be evangelism trainings, and we'll talk about what we do with disciple making teams, all of those kinds of things. So as people are beginning to actually integrate these principles, there's a need for further, deeper training, especially for those who actually want to go, right? So for most churches in America, that looks like offloading that piece to the missions agency, right? So that was kind of my story before going overseas. It's, my church didn't have the resources or ability to do anything like that. So they said, we'll just let the IMB take care of that, and you get 8 weeks of training or so before you go overseas long term. And then the final element is the go piece. And I broke that up into short and long term. So again, for most churches, that looks like kind of outsourcing, offloading those parts. But let's dive into each one of those elements, and I'll show you a little bit about what we do. If you want to learn more about that, the pipeline book would be a great way to kind of see what we do in each of those phases. But our 4 big ones are Mission of God, which is our missions class. I'll tell you about that just in a second here. Disciple making teams, which I'll tell you about, 10-week disciple-making intensives, launch communities, which is a 9-month training program that's in-house, and then short or long-term actual going. And these are not clearly distinct categories, right? They kind of bleed over and feed back into each other and all of those kinds of things. But just for the sake of clarity, breaking it up into 4. Now, our training process that we do is not honestly reproducible in most churches. Like our missions team is 12 people. So obviously, like most churches don't even have a missions pastor, let alone 12 people. So don't hear me saying that like you have to have 12 people and do this massive thing or else you can't do it. You just got to have some kind of further training component. It might be through something like Radius, or it might be through a kind of like internship, where people work and they kind of plug into, refugee communities or international ministry, and you walk with them through books and all of those kinds of things. But there has to be some kind of further training and assessment, I would argue, before just kind of offloading them to the sending agencies. Because, just looking back at the class that I was sent out with through the IMB, I can count on 2 hands the amount of people still doing like full-time ministry among the unreached. The attrition rate is very high, and the IMB does it the best of any missions agency. And still the attrition rate is very high. And part of that is because a lot of people don't really know all that much about what they're really getting into and haven't lived in those kinds of rhythms before signing up to go overseas. Perspectives, Mission of God, something like that, super, super critical. We used to did perspectives at our church for over a decade, but we moved away from perspectives for a variety of reasons. It's really, we wanted more of a hands-on approach in designing the class, like it sounds like you guys have done. We also provide childcare because we want to make it so families can go. Perspectives wouldn't really allow that. We also want to provide a meal because that's a big attractor to college students and kind of builds community as they sit there and just just chat for, 20 minutes or so over a meal. It's also a great way to get our whole church body involved. So we don't have a lot of older people in our church, but for those older people, it's like a great way to actually get involved in sending efforts is just through preparing a meal for, 100 something college students. And then we also do application events over the 10 weeks and so on. So we also wanted it to be shorter. Like you guys were saying, Perspective is long. 16 weeks is a lot. It's really academic. It's just a lot of material. So we wanted to kind of put it on the bottom shelf, make the material more accessible. We wanted to focus more also on like abiding and the kind of heart attitude that leads to us wanting to see Jesus glorified among all peoples. So we have some lessons that are different than Perspectives. But if Perspectives is available in your city and that's what you have the bandwidth to do Perspectives. Like, it'll be great, life-changing, but why we put such a big emphasis on classes like this is because when we talk to our folks who go overseas, to a person, every single one went through a class like that. Now, sometimes it'll be a little bit out of order, like they'll maybe have gone on a short-term trip and then it just blows up their world and they come back and say, I need to learn more about this. That's more the exception. But every single person went through a class like this, and that's kind of where it all clicked for them, that they saw just wasn't a cool idea, but this is actually God's word telling me that this is what he longs for, is to be worshiped by all peoples. What we desire from a class like that, and why I would argue you need to implement something along those lines, is because people walk away, every single person walks away knowing that the Great Commission is for them. So they know that they are going to participate in the Great Commission, whether it's being a goer or a sender. And it's a trajectory-setting class. Like, we see freshmen come into this class. I can think of one guy specifically who met him on his first Sunday, really had like kind of stopped attending church period in high school, rough family situation and so on. But went to Mission of God was kind of the first thing that he got plugged in with at our church, and that got him deeply plugged into the college ministry and has been leading a small group and will be on the core team of the Austin church plant that will be leaving early 2023 to plant. And he's actually pretty crazy. Going to go with another college student. These two guys are going to be in villages in Bangladesh this summer, trying to form groups of believers, isolated believers in these villages, into churches this summer. So that was all from his first touch point being this class in the fall semester of his freshman year. So I want to hammer on this really hard, because investing your time in something like this is huge. A one-off sermon just isn't enough, right? It's easy to kind of tune out for 20 minutes and then you've already missed most of the sermon and you missed your one shot for the year, right? But signing up for a class like this, they're confronted with God's truth and the realities of the unreached every single week. For 6 weeks, 10 weeks, 16 weeks, whatever it is. They're challenged every week for an extended period. And that's the kind of thing that starts to break down the excuses that people naturally have to why, like, that's good for some people, but not for me. But Mission of God is just one thing, and that's part of our kind of stepping stones, what would go in that exposure box. So I'll just really quickly run through some of the other things that we do. We do Secret Church every spring, which is great, really plug and play. You can do it next year, easy peasy. Great, easy win, right? Secret Church was April 29th. But it continues to stream. So I think you can do it afterwards, but we do it the night that it's all streaming. And, we change some stuff. Like, they'll have a prayer emphasis and we'll kind of pause the stream at that point and Typically, we'll have at least one missionary who's on home assignment during that time. This time we happen to have 2, so we had them come up and share about what they're doing, and then have people pray for them during the breaks. So we also do in May. First week of May, we just had it. We do a Send Sunday. So we'll commission new missionaries. So we commissioned a couple just a couple weekends ago. We'll have a vision video. So we had people actually from our congregation reading scripture in like 6 or 7 different languages. We'll have like special themed visuals, a sermon that touches on the nation. We actually sold these shirts, which are pretty sweet, that our graphic designer designed. So we do that in May. It's just kind of like a whole Sunday experience that gets the nations in front of people. Then Govember, and each November is our month-long missions emphasis month. So during that month, we'll have tons of different events that get the nations, the unreached, in front of people. So we do missions gallery, which is like art, installations, educational kind of night where people are introduced to the realities of the unreached. We'll do like Q&As. This past year, we did Q&A with 5 goers who happened to be on stateside at the time, which was awesome, super engaging. And then a Q&A also with Frontiers, a sending agency. We had the president and another leader there doing a Q&A. We'll do like a mosque visit because we have a pretty good relationship with the mosque in town. We'll do like a ladies brunch, which is just pitched as like women's brunch. And then, it's kind of like bait and switch. Oh, also the nations. They know it's in Govember. So, we've done a film screening before. If there's a good film we showed in the past, which was really well attended, was Free Burma Rangers. Have you guys ever seen that? Great. Yeah, very, very engaging. We'll do a church-wide night of prayer and missions. And so we'll do that on the same night and at the same time as we normally do college gathering, but pitch it to the whole church. Be like, this is not a college thing. This is for everyone. Bring your small group, bring your friends. And that was really well attended this past year. So it was extended time of worship and then praying specifically for the largest unreached people groups in all of the kind of big religious blocks. So Hindu, unreligious, Muslim, and Buddhist. And that was kind of a prayer focus throughout the whole month. We'll do an evangelism training. We'll unveil the short-term trips that we're going to do the following year and so on. 2 times a year, we release a magazine called Neighborhood to Nations that in Govember we'll actually print copies. And then in May for Send Sunday, it's a digital deal. And we highlight what we're doing with domestic church planting, with For the City, so like our city partnerships, foster care, all that kind of stuff, our global church planting. All of that stuff is in Neighborhood to Nations, so release that twice a year to kind of keep it in front of people all the time. Each fall, we do a cultural exchange program with our university and get 50-ish families to sign up for that each year, and those relationships last throughout the whole year. I can tell you more about that after if you'd like. We do explore studies, which are kind of like Mission of God or Perspectives or something like that, but in 7 really short lessons. It's a little booklet. It's not something we came up with. The PDF is free online. It's awesome. Explore, just explore. And it kind of leads itself. So you can do it with a college student and say, hey, do this with your roommates, and they can 100% run with it. It's awesome. We'll, obviously have regular mentions in sermons, in our gospel communities, our small groups. We have engagement with like our returning goers who are on home assignment. They'll visit GCs or meet people one-on-one or meet people after services. Each month, one Sunday, we'll have a goer of the month. So during the service, we'll actually have someone from their A team, which is their advocacy team. It's like the small group that forms around them to care for them after they go. Their A-team leader or someone from their A-team will stand on stage, will play a clip that the missionaries actually recorded saying, here's who we are, here's how you can pray for us. Really short, like a minute clip. And then the A-team leader or member will lead the congregation to pray for them. So it's just another way each month to keep this in front of people. You notice this is a lot of stuff, right? And then there's regular just one-on-one engagement with our team. Goer of the month. We also, this is a cool thing about this kind of like slow dripping constantly, it multiplies, right? So there's someone in the kids ministry who really cares about the nations. And so on her own, I found out about this after the fact. The Goer of the month is also a feature in the kids' classrooms. Like they'll have a picture of like, this is where they are and this is what the food's like and this is their family and so on. And so even kids are being exposed to these realities. And because our team is quite large, they're regularly having touch points with people on Sundays and throughout the week, getting coffee with them and so on. And then as we raise up more goers, this just multiplies because they have their own sphere of influence that they're telling about what they're doing. They're on their newsletters. They'll visit when they're coming home. They have their own small groups and gospel communities that knew them before they went. And so it just continues to multiply and multiply. But it sounds like a lot of stuff, and it is, because that is how you send a lot of people. You have to build a culture of sending, and this requires slow dripping this all the time, year-round, talking about the nations, talking about sending, talking about the needs, and inviting people into it. So what I want to encourage you to do after this, as you're going through that worksheet, is consider what are the things that you're doing right now and what are things that you can implement over the next 6 months to begin getting the nations in front of your people. Maybe it's just within your college ministry or the church as a whole. Start where you can, right? Maybe it's just with your team, but get these regular touch points. You saw this is not once or twice even a year. It's not just 1 month. This is constantly. It's being put in front of people because I'm sure you guys have heard this cliche, but vision is a leaky bucket. Right? So you need to constantly be filling that vision bucket or else people are going to lose it. And there's another cliche that, once you're sick of saying it, people have probably heard it for the first time, right? So we need to keep this stuff in front of people all the time. And that's the only way. Once you're talking about it like every week or, every other week and in all of these different formats, they're going to be like, wow, so you guys like this missions thing, that seems to be important or something, right? Like you guys seem to care about this, and you'd be amazed at how many people are even at Redeemer and hearing it all the time. And then 6 months in, it clicks and they're like, this missions thing seems to be a big deal here, and that is how you'll actually see people raised up. So the next big piece, if the first big piece is mission of God, is kind of like the intellectual foundation of this sending. DMT, which is disciple making teams, not the drug, unfortunate acronym. DMT would be like the practical foundation. Okay, so you got a handout there that kind of, we won't go over all of it, but you can go over this in your own time. It's the biggest part of our do box, right? So this is as people are getting exposed to the nations, they want to take a next step and starting to actually make disciples. They join a disciple-making team. So what's really encouraging to me is that this is not just a theoretical thing. Like students actually really begin to seriously multiply through these groups. So this past year, we saw God do incredible things. So in only 10 weeks, students and a couple of families, but mostly students, engaged in 1,700 spiritual conversations and shared the gospel over 700 times. 48 non-believers were engaged in Bible studies, and 17 people professed faith in 10 weeks. And these numbers sound crazy. You might think, wow, these people must be like such great evangelists. No, most of these people had never shared their faith before joining one of these disciple-making teams. These are just regular students. But we help take them along with us, show them what it means to multiply, and then it's just a lot of people doing a lot of little things regularly adds up to these really incredible God-sized results. So these groups come together for just 10 weeks. So it's intense. It's a big commitment, but having from the start a clear end date allows us to call people to say, hey, we know you got lots of other stuff, but prioritize this for the next 10 weeks. It's just 10 weeks. And then, you can kind of go back into your normal life rhythms. But the goal is to set them on the trajectory for long-term faithfulness in making disciples through those 10 weeks. It kind of just changes people's entire worldview of how they see their time and their friends and the way that God can use them. They're also small, the groups, 6 to 12 people at the absolute max, but they're not typical small groups or Bible studies. They're intentionally called teams, right? These are teams that come together specifically for the purpose to make disciples. And we want to lead with that up front. Like, we do not want people to come in thinking, they're just going to get another sit back, be passive Bible study. It's like you are coming together with a team to make disciples for 10 weeks. But we want students to know how they can not just make disciples, but most importantly is establishing them in like basic spiritual disciplines, right? So part of what they covenant to and are held accountable for is these spiritual rhythms that we summarize in 3-2-1. So it's 3 hours of time in the Word and prayer on their own. Right? So it's like 30 minutes a day with one flex day, grace day, pretty low bar, right? But we hold them accountable to it each week. Like, say, how did that go? And have them tell us and hold each other accountable for it lovingly. 2 is 2 hours of intentional time among the lost. So that means like actually going out and seeking new lost people to share the gospel with them. And then 1 is 1 hour of corporate prayer a week. So it's usually in the morning. We'll meet and we model for them how to facilitate prayer as a group for an extended period. So we'll at the beginning have them write down things that they want to pray for persistently over the 10 weeks. So we have that. We'll share with them the Joshua Project, or the IMB has a great prayer app also that has plenty of requests in there for when people kind of don't know what to say. Then we'll model for them praying through a psalm, and college students walk away amazed, wow, praying together for an hour is actually not difficult and really fun. In addition, there's a 2-hour weekly meeting each week, usually on Sunday nights. So like I said, it's a big commitment, right? It's realistically probably 6 hours in addition to their time in the Word and prayer, which we hope they're doing anyways. And that includes time for the homework, which is reading a book called Spiritual Multiplication in the Real World. But the goal is to have them establish these life rhythms that they can continue out of DMT. So a lot of students say this is the first time they've ever really read the Bible consistently, because normally people don't hold them accountable for it. So that's a huge win. The team meetings follow a specific format that you'll see on there. There's a care component. They're introduced to new tools. There's practice time and so on. But kind of the secret sauce of these disciple-making teams is what we call fishing, just sharing the gospel, right? So it's hugely intimidating to people at first. It's honestly a major barrier. I'm going to have to go out and share the gospel with people at Walmart for 2 hours a week. I mean, that's crazy. But we tell people this is the come with me approach, right? First time you go out, I'm not asking you to do anything. You just come with me, watch me do it. And then slowly they'll build up to going out even on their own without a leader, and sharing their faith. What would you guys say, in your ministries, what do you think an average college student, how much evangelism experience might they get over their time in your college ministry? I think probably most college ministries would be like, I don't know, a couple hours maybe. That'd be great. There's not, if you don't have an intentional way to get people to do that, like, I don't know if you've ever done anything like this, but you have the hangout, 60 people show up, and then it's like, okay, guys, we're going to go out tomorrow and go on campus and like share our faith. And 2 guys show up who are kind of weird, like that's kind of the norm. But through DMTs, people get 20 hours, minimum 20 hours of actual experience going out and sharing their faith in just 10 weeks. And part of it is because it's come with me, not you just go out and do that, but come with me. So the strategy that we use, it's outlined in there. It's super, super simple for teaching students how to share their faith. We do something called Care with Prayer. It's wouldn't work everywhere, would not work in Los Angeles where I grew up, but works great in Texas and places like this where people are at least not hostile towards Christianity. And it's just like walking up to someone in a grocery store and saying, hey, we're out shopping. We like to pray for people when we do that. Is there anything that we could pray for you about? And it sounds crazy, but probably 90% of people are like, oh, yeah, sure. My uncle is getting surgery next week. Like, can you pray for him? So we pray for him right there. And then we transition into something called 15-second testimony, which is just super simple. Your testimony, 15 seconds. And from there, it's a really smooth transition into the gospel. And we teach people to share the gospel using the 3 circles, which maybe you've heard of before. Super, super easy, really reproducible. A student can come in with no evangelism experience, within 2 weeks be able to run the whole play and share the gospel with someone, invite them to believe. And I mean, we see freshmen leading people to faith in supermarkets each year. It sounds crazy, but it's very, very much doable. DMTs are also very intentional, though, in that there's an evaluation as well. So we have a rubric. If you're interested in implementing something like this, I'd be happy to share it with you. But the leaders will evaluate the people in their groups according to this rubric. And the point is not to like say, you're a 82 Christian and you're a 53, you fail. But the point is, a lot of people rise up as like, wow, this person's a great leader and this person's super faithful and they're multiplying and we didn't even really know about them before. Like no one really knew them. They just signed up for this. So it helps feed back into just the normal college ministry pipeline. Will pass those evaluations back and they'll go, whoa, this person like really, shined during these 10 weeks and we didn't even really know about them before. It can also show areas of growth for people who maybe even want to go overseas but have really poor time management or something like that. And it's not a failure thing, but it's like, hey, maybe we need to walk with this person and how to say no to some things or prioritize. Again, kind of a huge emphasis with all of these things, right, is next step. So every single person in the DMT, at least once, usually more than once, probably like every week, is being asked, like, what are you thinking God's stirring in you? What are you wanting to do next after this? So for some people, it might be stepping into a 9-month missionary training program. For the majority of people, it might be, I want to multiply these things back into my college small group or my adult small group, my gospel community, those kinds of things. But everyone's constantly being challenged. Don't leave this here. What's the next thing you're going to do with this? So that handout, we're almost up on time here, but that handout is super simple. It's really boiled down, but it's designed to help you actually implement something like this in your ministry immediately. So if you'd like to talk more about that, how you can do something like that, I'm available. I'll be here today and I can give you guys my email. I'd love to talk with you more about that. The dividends that it would pay to your college ministry and then also sending is huge because ultimately we want to create disciple makers, right? So we're not trying to send people overseas who are missions people, right? We're trying to send people overseas who are disciple makers, people who love Jesus and want other people to know and worship him, right? So we want to see people proving that here long before we send them overseas. Yeah, Ben.
I was just going to add, so I'm at Redeemer, one of the executive pastors on staff. 2 quick things for y'all too. Like, one is the importance for us. This culture is like across the whole top and all the way down the organization. And so as much as you can do to get leadership buy-in, if you can bring an executive pastor or lead pastor, if you can, really put that on your radar too in terms of like what will get things off the ground. And then second, we always just want to have open hands, open doors. If somebody wants to come to Lubbock, and see one of these things, or like come sit in for a week and go see what a DMT does, what that's like, come to a Mission of God class, or experience any of that stuff. We just want to help and share as much as possible. So
yeah, it's an open door. You could come. Great time to come would be come in November. Come see a Mission of God class. Come see one of our 9-month missionary training program. What one of those groups looks like. Come out with one of our mobilizers, someone on our team, fishing to see this kind of thing. Come to our college gathering. It seriously is an open door. We want to be a resource. And like he said, the reason we can do all that stuff, like I was talking about, it sounds like, well, you're doing a ton of stuff to keep missions in front of people all the time, is because every single top level leader cares about it. Mm-hmm. So that kind of is step one.
We require all paid staff to do Mission of God and do DMTs within the first 2 years of being employed. Like, it's that important to us.
Yeah.
It's like we see that as mandated training that they can take out of their workday to do during those times. So.
Do you guys have how's your church broken down into smaller groups? That do you guys have community groups, small groups, whatever, normal, just people that are not in DMTs they're regularly a part of?
Yeah. So it's we're a pretty simple church in terms of programs and stuff like that. We really don't have much. So whole church gathering, gospel communities are the small groups. There's college gospel communities, adult gospel communities. And then the smaller group would be a grow group, which is like a D group kind of thing. Robbie Gallaty, that kind of whole thing, Here Journal.
Men with men, women with women.
Yeah.
Discipleship.
Yeah. That's designed for, a year to a year and a half kind of thing. And the hope is that it would multiply.
So when they're in a DMT, do they neglect these other groups?
That's a great question.
Not in these other groups.
So for the participant, it's very much possible to continue on in your GC and your grow group and those kinds of things. It requires saying no to other things. Like, you're probably not going to be watching a lot of Netflix during those 10 weeks.
More so kind of how our college ministry is structured is it's a whole year. Similarly, kind of like a DMT, but you're in a group, you're Bible study group. We call them Bible study still, but they're more like little families, and they participate with each other the whole year, and they have a dorm that they're responsible for ministering and reaching out to on campus, one of the freshman dorms. And so there are definitely some differences there, but I was just wondered if people were.
I'd say a lot of people do step out. A lot of people, I feel like the majority of people probably step out of their gospel community, their small group, for that 10-week season, because it's like an intensive, higher bar commitment. It's really not a play we would run for everybody, because it's a higher bar commitment. Yeah. It's like a next kind of level of commitment.
Who leaves your the gospel communities in the college ministry? Who leave do staff lead those, or do students? They lead those, and most student leaders. Do you want them to have taken done a DMT before they
Not necessarily. And probably the group that with the highest frequency has to step out of something to do a DMT would be student leaders. And that's something we're trying to figure out, because it's not great for someone to step out for 10 weeks during spring semester. So we're trying to figure out like which parts, this is still a work in progress, which parts can we flex for the DMT, which parts can we flex for the student leader commitments, because we want every student leader to participate in a DMT, because it just bumps up their capabilities a great deal.
Their
yes.
For people recognizing
yes.
that doing something way bigger than them. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Sam Dawson also leads breakout. She's our associate director of college, and so in her breakout, she's going through like our whole college pipeline. But you can also, I think, interact with her and that team from the college leadership perspective, and just hear how they experience it and how they interact with it with like college students and manage it. There are tensions to be managed, I would say.
Yeah.
She's the co-director of the college ministry, you said?
She's associate director, yeah.
Associate director.
Yeah. But she's leading a breakout, going through our whole college pipeline as well.
Yeah. So this is just what I would encourage you guys to do as a result. First of all, if you want to talk any more about any of these questions, I'll be around. Ben knows our pipeline very well as well, and he'll be around. And I can give you my email and phone number. Would love to talk more. But begin to think out intentionally in those kind of 4 areas. What can you do? What are you already doing? What more can you do in each of those areas? And then also, what's going to be the bridge between each of those? Like, what is the next step that you're calling people to along each one, right? Because that's how you're going to move people along the pipeline, is having clear next steps. But let me close us in prayer, and then it's lunchtime. Father, we just we praise you for who you are, that you are the creator of all things, that you are good and righteous and ruling and reigning over all creation. And we thank you for your word that makes so clear your desire to be known and worshiped by all peoples, not just us here in this room or here in America, but people of every tribe, tongue, and nation. We thank you for the picture that we see in Revelation and elsewhere of that being fulfilled. So we take great hope in that. Looking at world statistics and so on, it can be discouraging to think of 25% of the world population that has less than 0.1% believers among their people groups. But we know that that is not the end of the story, that you are working out your good purposes in the world, and that you have chosen to use frail and weak people like us and our churches to that end. So I pray for every single person here in the churches and associations that they represent, that you would use these people, that you would use these college ministries, use these state associations to see your name, the name of Jesus Christ, worshipped among all peoples. Pray that you would give us all wisdom in how to do that, in building out these pipelines and systems, knowing that no pipeline or system is worth anything if you do not move. So we submit these things to you and ask that you would be pleased to condescend to use us in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you, guys. My email, if you want it, by the way, is Madison, Madison, at redeemerlubbock.org. So pretty simple email. Please do reach out if we can serve you guys.